pretty impressive. And not only do I have a clean background, I also we're doing the recording. So thanks a lot for coming tonight. Welcome to the So You Want to Write a Novel. This is a very casual open house, just trying to get a sense, give you a sense of the program and what we're about, and answer any questions. So if you have questions, we're going to. It's not that big a group tonight, so if you wanted to raise your hand, you could do that. But Jamie's going to be Jamie Vandervelde, one of our peer artist leaders, is going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions as it goes along, she'll be grabbing those as well. So I want to I'm going to be just talking tonight with my colleague Allison, who I co-founded the program with back in 2020. We started out 10 years ago. We built a writing center that was focused on a variety of different cases for novel and memoir writers. And in that program, many writers really felt like, hey, I want to do bigger projects. I want to do books. That's something that I was always been working on, and really interested in how do you build a community about that. So we decided in 2020 to spin off.
Please, Larry. Okay.
Is there someone that got a mute go or talking here? So we started in 2020 with a small group, about 12 people, and this was pre-pandemic days. And then in March of that year, we went virtual, which was really a godsend during that time, because as the world was getting very crazy, we had these projects to work on that kept us all grounded. And as we've expanded the program, we've gone, we've had students from all over the United States, which is also really wonderful that we could actually get to know people, and the diversity of perspectives, for not only age-wise, gender, profession, geography. It's just been really wonderful to see so many different people and working on their projects. So I probably should do a formal. I'm the Greg Phelan. I'm the director, executive director. So as I mentioned, Allison's with me. She's going to be talking about different aspects of the program. And Jamie Vandervelde, she's also a peer artist leader. She started out in the Novel Incubator last year and has been stepping up. We knew that she was a teacher. She kind of kept it hidden during the Novel Incubator. She was kind of like in the stealth mode, and they're like, well, this person actually can run groups as well. And so she's been leading one of our peer revision labs for the novel group this year as well. And we have Rachel Deal, who's also in the Novel Incubator, is a wonderful writer. Evelyn Camus, she's another pal of mine from our Novel Incubator in 2022. And two people Dana I just was talking to. She's in the Novel Incubator this year working on a fantasy book. She just went through a reading round and got to share that with her peers there. And there might be, is Jessica here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Ah, all right, Jessica. It's great to meet you too. I haven't got the pleasure of meeting you, but I've heard wonderful things about you as well. So why don't I'm going to ask Jessica, since I know you actually, I think, have to leave in a little bit. So I'm going to ask you, like, what drew you to the program, and tell us a little bit about your experience.
Sure. I have been writing poetry for most of my life, with some short stories here and there, but then I had an idea for a novel, and for several years was trying to write it. And as a poet, really didn't know what to do. It's a very different thing. It's a very different skill set. And I'm not sure how I thought to look up Novel Incubator, but I came across some other programs that were like 10 times the price of this. So I decided to look into this one. And I'm very glad that I did. It was the best thing to invest in myself for.
So what was the experience like gearing up to that big deadline and sharing that 50,000 word manuscript?
It was, we talk a lot about resistance in the incubator. So we work a lot for, dealing with our resistance to write. And it was really helpful to have a community of people to help with accountability, and to help with also, like, you're not alone in feeling the way that you're feeling. Sometimes we felt really good about what we wrote. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we just didn't want to write. So just having that support and accountability made a difference in being able to write a novel in several months versus like having pieces of a novel written over the course of 8 years and never getting anywhere. What was the rest of your question? I kind
Yeah,
of lost track.
that was good. I mean, did you guys so you did the reading round, and what was that like?
Actually, Dana and I were in the same group.
So you could
So,
actually have a mini pod right now.
yeah, I'm patiently awaiting her second novel in the series because her first was very good. It was, as the person being read, it was nerve-wracking, of course, but there was also a knowing because we've spent so much time together and kind of knew each other and knew that we were going into this not in a like, there's a lot of people kind of have some trauma from writing critique groups, and that was not the experience in this group. We were doing positive feedback because we wanted to encourage each other to keep writing and not be so critical that people wouldn't want to write anymore. But so there was kind of that understanding going in, but still, it's a very vulnerable place to be when you're like, here's my child for you to read. That is it's a first draft, but we all wrote first drafts, so we're all kind of in the same position. But at the same time, when I read my peers' works, it was like with pure joy. I was like so excited for them, and the feeling was mutual. It wasn't like, we're overlooking things to critique. It was like a sincere, like, I am so proud of this person. This is such a good piece of work. So it was extremely positive, and we still were able to leave each reading round with like ideas of where to take our novel next or how to revise a little bit. And then I know that we have some like revision tips coming in our next meetings and stuff. But yeah.
Sounds great. So that's wonderful, Jessica. I really appreciate that. I mean, there's a number of things you said that really made me feel especially good because they were so instrumental to what we did with what we wanted to do with the program. And you mentioned the price initially, and I think one of the things, a big focus of ours has been making the program accessible and not, I did an MFA, which is many thousands of dollars, and it was a good opportunity to work on my craft, but it wasn't necessarily as focused on the project of writing a book and the support. Also, you mentioned the positive feedback. That's also another big kind of ingrained thing about the program. People say, "Hey, I want you to tell me the real, give it to me, give me the bad news. I want you to be tough on me." And it turns out that we shut down as individuals when people critique us, and I think there's this thing kind of where the background of a lot of workshops have come is that it was very competitive and trying to tear people down and before you build them back up. And psychologists have come to realize that actually focusing on strengths and helping people determine what their strengths are and building them up is a much more effective way to actually get things done. It's also a lot more pleasurable. And I think, I've been in a lot of variety of different workshops over the years, and I always felt that so much of it was more about group dynamics and who was on top and who had the favor of the teacher and all that kind of stuff. And we really try to put all that aside. We're all peers, no one's up, no one's down. We're all artists on this journey together. So I think that was kind of like some of these core ideas that like our own experiences. A number of us have MFAs, a number of us have done all these different workshops, a number of us, like you said, have been traumatized in different ways. I had, I've gotten critiques from people like would say an offhanded comment, and it kind of diverted me for years, like on other tracks because and it just was like a flippant thing that was more about them than me. But I think there's just something about this, our children, as you said, we need to care for them. We need to incubate them. And it turns out positive feedback actually, it's not, like, oh, this is wonderful, great job, keep going. I mean, there's some of that just, enthusiasm, but a lot of it's like, hey, you did this scene really amazing with this one character. You really brought it to life. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. And getting that feedback is invaluable to people because they're like, oh my gosh, I did it there. That means I could do it there and there and there. And, we're so self-critical, and we're so full of doubts as writers that we need people who can kind of say, hey, listen, what's working here, and how can I build on that? So, just in a nutshell, like, why Book Inc? We wanted to provide community. We realize how difficult this is to do it on your own. It's also more fun with people. I mean, that's one thing that's so clear to me after, I kid around saying I started this program for myself because I was so isolated. But I've met so many great writers who become great friends, and they've made so much difference in my writing practice, but it's also just been much more pleasurable. They've influenced me. They've recommended books that's changed the course of my thing. I've gotten a lot out of giving them feedback, and giving them support. With this old idea that equality. So I think I feel this very strongly. It's like, I went to, when I had my MFA, there's like this is the vaulted, eminences, and we're all there to get their blessing that we're real writers. And I just find that fundamentally flawed. It's like, just because you're at this stage in your writing and I'm here doesn't mean that we're not peers. And I really think that's very strongly that we're all, we're all equal. We're all on an artistic journey, which is really fundamentally very hard. It's hard in this world to be an artist. It's hard to take time. It's hard to talk to people about your art who don't do it. And I think, so it's important to have that space. I also, another big thing is to be sustainable. So, the MFA program was 2 years, it's done. A lot of workshops, you do them, they're done. And, we have a novel in a year program, but we also have the book revision lab, and we have the book submission lab, and we have what we're starting this year, a monthly forum for people who've already done those things, and they're just still hanging in there and working on their book, and they want the support. And we don't want this to be done. This is like we call ourselves a writing collaborative, helping us each other foster, help us realize the potential of our work, both artistically and commercially, and whatever that means for you as an artist. And we also, this is a kind of a thing that's growing, and it's going to grow as more people join us, is to provide a platform to support each other and promote each other in practical ways. So we just had one of our peer artist leaders, Celine Keating, just published a book. And so we've used this platform to help her. So we have a newsletter, we have social media, we have our website. All the Book Inc writers who go through the program get their own artist page. So as a writer, you might want to have your own website, and that's good and it's important. But if you're kind of getting started out, maybe you don't want to spend that thing, but you still want to have it on your query letters, or you want to have it to share. But it's just nice, like when someone publishes something, we support it, and we want that to grow. So when you do go to a publisher or an agent and say, hey, listen, everybody talks about their platform and you've got to build your own platform. Well, we're building a platform for the group, so everybody doesn't have to do that for each other. And so the last thing, for just kind of the big whys, and there's more about this on the website, is that we just want to have a pool of engaged, fresh, supportive readers. So when you're done with your draft, Jessica was talking about the reading round, and Dana, is that we have these little pods of 3, and you share your book with 2 other people, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But they're not pointing out your weaknesses or why you're, we all know our stuff is a work in progress, and especially our first drafts, there's so much more to go. But they're saying, hey, this really works. I engaged with this character. I really like this. And like, wow, they like that. I want to give them more of that. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I've personally discovered and seen this with the people in the groups, is that, it's so much fun to entertain somebody. So if someone says to me, Jamie was in one of my pods and Allison's been in one of my pods. So if Allison said, hey, and Rachel, and, like if they said, hey, Rachel likes this and Jamie likes this, I want to give them more of that. I mean, there's particular comments that I can remember of each of those people who've said about my book that I still think about almost daily. Like, oh, that was really cool. I really like that. And, it's kind of like the fundamentals of storytelling when you're around a fire, and, and when people are perking up, you want to go with it, right? When people are smiling, you want to go with it. But as novelists or memoir writers, it's hard to get that feedback in a kind of a unfiltered way that's useful. And I think that's another reason why we don't critique, because I say, like, I'm not a professional editor. I'm not a professional critiquer. I mean, I have my opinions and I've written book reviews. So what? But as a reader, my judgment is valuable. Everybody's reading judgment is valuable. And that's what we want. We want positive feedback as a reader to help us say, oh, this is how my book was experienced in this other brain. So that's why we put the program together since we started in 2020. And we're just still in the baby stages of this, as far as books are long-term projects, year, 2, 3, 4-year projects, right? So the fruition of what we're doing is going to take some time. But the good news is that if you have that kind of inclination, you want to be part of something that's kind of growing. It's got some buzz. It feels right. This is kind of a something that you feel that this is the kind of people I want to be around. You could be an instrumental part of helping us build this together. So one of the things, so since 2020, we drafted 55 novels and memoirs. That's just first drafts, incubators. Here it is. Here's my book. And then we've completed and shared 181 revised versions of those drafts. And over a dozen writers from our past incubators are actively querying. Many of them have gotten full manuscript requests. So we're pumping away. I mean, it takes a while to kind of get the work out in the world, and we're committed to this approach. And I must say personally, I mean, I'm biased. I'm the director of this program, and I founded it. But the books that I've had the pleasure to read in this program have been really great. I mean, I did go to, like I keep mentioning the MFA, and I read a lot of workshop stuff. The books in this one have been more entertaining and engaging because our focus is on the story first and foremost. So craft is important, and we all have to learn our craft, and we also have to improve on the line editing level. But I think most programs kind of start from there, and then kind of story is like an afterthought. At least it was in the programs I was looking at. I mean, I think there's been a little bit of evolution here, and we'll talk more about that. But we're looking at the big structure. We're looking at the story. And the biggest thing that we want is commitment. We want people to say, hey, listen, I'm willing to put the time in to do this. And I want to be part of this process. But we're not, it's different. It's different, like to say, okay, you're this good writer, so you get to go do this. It's more like, no, you've got a story, you've got a commitment. You'd seem like you'd be a good fit for this community. So speaking of this, so I think this is like the big question that we all ask ourselves. You show up on this Zoom, who are these people? Do I want to be hanging out with them and commit time and money to this effort? So Allison's going to talk about that. But before that, I wanted to ask Jamie about that. So Jamie was part of Project Right Now, and she did a couple things before that, and then she heard about this program. So I wanted to ask her if you can remember back when you were looking at this, Jamie, like what made this program a good fit for you?
Hi, I'm Jamie Vandervelde. I was introduced to Project Right Now through the Teacher Writing Collaborative. And as Greg mentioned, I kept that piece of information very quiet when I first started the novel incubator on purpose, because I wanted the experience of being a student and just being a participant. But that's what brought me into the novel incubator. And my biggest draws, I agree with Jessica that it wasn't cost prohibitive. Like I was like, okay, I can do this. And also for me, as much as I would love to have done something like Greg did, an MFA program, I work full time. So I saw the way that this was set up, that I was able to pursue a creative endeavor that I'd always wanted to do, to write a novel. And it would be feasible for me to do that both through price and also for the timing of the classes. In addition, I personally like the Zoom format because if I could save some time not commuting, I could squeak in some extra writing here and there. Also, in my novel incubator cohort, which Evelyn and Rachel were a part of too, along with Greg, we had people from all over, people I would have met otherwise. And we were such a cohesive, supportive group all the way through. And it just opened me up to other people who are interested in writing, literature, and who were coming from all walks of life and all different parts of their lives. For me, also having a structure that, okay, at the end of this program, you need to have 50,000 words written and it needs to be by this date. Having a hard date really helped for me. So I couldn't just nebulously be like, oh, I'll put this off another week. I'll do this. So it made me really organize my schedule in such a way where it was like, I've committed, I put some skin in the game in terms of like my time, my energy, my money, and I really want to do this. For me, for a number of reasons, and just in general, it was always a personal aspiration of mine to write a book. And I also unexpectedly really appreciated having a strong writers community. People who, if you post anything, a question, a concern, they'll support you if you submit something. If you have a question, people are very forthcoming on our Slack channel, which is like a shared message board that we use in between class sessions. So that has been an amazing part of it, and not something that I necessarily anticipated, but it was a very good feature for me. So having come from a very academic background, having like a creatively nourishing environment and not an academically competitive environment allowed me to relax enough to write the book. So Rachel, do you want to say what you found to be a good fit in the program? Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for tossing it to me, because I wanted to second a lot of the things that you said about the Zoom format, but then also add to that. So for me, one kind of cool phenomenon that kept happening was after the meetings, I was in such a flow from talking about the work and like being in it that I would end up continuing to write. And I feel like that doesn't really happen if I'm like going to a meeting in person and then having to like get in my car and go. Like I was already at my desk, and it's like it gets your butt in the chair. So that was a big thing for me. I found a lot of productivity being in the meeting, but then also after. And like you said, being able to join and meet people from all over the country. And at the time when I joined the first program, I did the novel incubator in what would that have been? Greg, was it 2021? 2022.
Yeah,
it was last year. So I was living very remote. I was taking care of my grandma during COVID, and like really craving community, kind of missing out on that because I'd been living in the city before, and now I was in this area where there was just like nobody really to talk to about my writing. And I was just kind of like in a vortex, or in a void. That's the word I'm looking for. So yeah, suddenly being on the screen with all this creative energy was really huge, and transformed my writing practice, which was still kind of, I guess, burgeoning at the time. I had discovered The Artist's Way. Many of you might be familiar with that, Julia Cameron. And so I'd been doing morning pages. And then I Zoomed with Greg, and I was just sort of hooked on the idea. So yeah, it's been a great experience. And then I joined the book submission lab this year to really start thinking about, okay, what are the next steps? And although I'm not quite to that place yet, that has been huge for me to think about it in terms of, what do I want to do with this? Like, what is my intention here? And really starting to think about career, and whether or not you plan to have a full-blown writing career. I think it's sort of an important step, if you're making something, thinking about where you want it to even live. So yeah, just like the full picture of writing something and putting it out into the world. I feel really supported through that whole experience.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to take it right now. Is that okay?
Of
course.
course.
I'm going to steal the mic really quick, because my job at the moment is to tell you who we are looking for, what kind of person we're hoping joins the Novel Incubator. So are you a good fit? We are looking for team players. We're looking for open-minded individuals who are willing to explore their art and their writing, but on the track that we offer. And we do offer different approaches, and we offer some lessons, and some will resonate with you and some won't. But we are asking that the writers give everything a shot. Try it, like what do they say? Don't mock it to try it. Anyway, we're also looking for people who want to work hard. It's funny because you start out kind of slow and you're like itching to write, and we're going at a really slow pace, and then it picks up, and then it's like, whoa. But we do kind of little by little get it done. I will say that my kids were young in 2020 when we first did this, and I wrote a 50,000 word manuscript. I think it was a little over by September in 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. I squeezed it in. You know, I didn't have a lot of time. I was working full time, teaching a ton of classes. Yeah. And I would just like squirrel myself, sometimes like hiding in the corner, like the bathroom with my keyboard on the porch. And I would just bang out 500 words, Monday through Friday. So we're also looking for people who are team, like I said, the team players part, but who are genuinely happy for other people's success. Like the group succeeds when each of us is encouraging the other. We've seen a lot of different types of writers. I'm a rebel by nature. So Greg knows I always want to jump ship, but I always keep one toe in the boat. You know, I hang in there, but I'm always dying to jump ship. We don't want you to jump ship. We want you to hang in there. Find ways to come back in and get excited about your work. There will be obstacles. That first year that we did it, I mean, someone got pregnant and had a baby in that year. People lost loved ones, parents, spouses. There were like hospitalizations. COVID was happening. And we still, all of us managed to hang in there and get the work done. Giving positive feedback's not easy. We are so trained to be critical. We want criticism because we want our worst fears confirmed. I suck at this. It's never going to work. I have so many flaws. But you know, the science says, positive psychology, there's research that positive feedback is more beneficial and helps people more than criticism. Of course, you are going to spot the problems in someone's manuscript, but you're not going to tell them because then that's all they're going to focus on. When you revise, you are taking what's good and moving forward with it and leaving everything else behind. We don't want to be obsessed with the things we're leaving behind. That's going to be like on the cutting room floor. You want to focus on what's working and drive that forward. So I was, a bit of a curmudgeon about this positive feedback thing, but it really worked. And I had to fake it because Greg convinced me that this was what we were doing. But I got on board, and the result is that people accomplish their goals. Like one of the stats I wish we had is like how many years people spent trying to write a book and failing versus our program, which is in 6 months, you draft a book and then you have 1 or 2 rounds of revision by the end of the year. So you have like a decent shape of a novel or memoir in whichever case in 12 months, like for pennies. I mean, these MFA programs, they're like $20,000, $30,000 a year. And you come out with basically the same thing. If you want to read a book a week and write a paper on it, we welcome you to do that. That's also what you do in an MFA. So yeah, we're looking for community. We're looking for you to hang in there through the tough stuff. We're looking for you to be on Zoom and participate. Like that's what a community member does. We're looking for you to be on Slack, which is kind of like not the sexiest platform. A lot of corporate offices use that to, give you deadlines and things. But we have found it really helpful to keep in touch and to ask the questions we cannot ask our loved ones. Like, should I kill this character or whatever? No, I'm just kidding. And one of the last, I feel like this is a nugget. You're going to get the facts of the program, like how long, what the pace is going to be, how we do it, the books that we read and why. But one of the other things that I feel like is important, you're going to be a reader for others and you're going to be providing feedback. We have had people struggling, like they want to share their manuscript and then they don't want to read anybody else's. So just know we have to scratch each other's backs. You can't just get your back scratched. Okay. Let's see. Community, move as a group. open-mindedness. I think I covered everything for now. Fresh reader. Yeah, there's more to come. Oh, I think the commitment, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was thinking the commitment would be something between like 8 to 10 hours a week. And that's, I feel like I did it in less because I was stressed and just trying to like squeeze out those words as fast as possible. But let me know if that's realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is, some people, they say write every day, which is what, I think it is an ideal because you can keep your unconscious working on your book the whole time, which is ideal. But some people have, like, family commitments, work commitments, a variety of different things. Some people just kind of binge write on the weekends. Some people have, are writing during soccer practice, watching their child play. I mean, it's just, and we've seen the variance. We've had, Jamie mentioned she's a full-time teacher, which my wife's a teacher. And I just think, teachers are, well, I have so much admiration for them because, it's not just a full-time job. You're actually doing a lot of lesson planning at home, and it's pretty much constant and during the school year. And Jamie's like, she's like my hero, like just keeping the discipline and keeping, this is the goal. But I think that's what the group is so helpful for. Like once we get, into the first, after we do the kind of the pre-work, which we'll talk a little bit about, and you get into the drafting, you say, okay, I need to get 2,500 words done a week. So that's 500 a day. How many words is that? You could do that in a half an hour if all the pre-work that we're going to talk about, that's actually kind of your raw material. It's like your clay. And then you're like, okay, I'm pulling that out. I'm going to write this scene today. I'm going to keep going. And in that first draft, you're really not looking for perfect prose. You're looking to achieve word count because you need the raw material to work on to get the shape of the book down. That's kind of the crucial first phase. Jamie, why don't you give us a couple factoids about the program?
I mean, in terms of the program, like we've already said, we complete a manuscript of 50,000 words by the end. Some people more, some people a little less, but that's what you're shooting for. And we meet via Zoom every other week, so every 2 weeks, and then you're on Slack as much as possible. There's the opportunity for daily check-in, to talk, to ask questions, to send private messages to others, participants in there, to keep you active and engaged and also accountable for what you're doing. So I found it to be a nice flow. The 8 to 10 hours a week or any variation in there seems pretty realistic to me in terms of like time commitment in addition. But like Rachel said earlier, I usually would go to bed after our class meeting ended at 9, full disclosure, but that would be something like in the morning when I was fresh, I'd write a few things down, I kind of take it into the dream state with me, and that worked for me. And obviously in the summer, I would have a little bit more time. So I think also too, what this allows for is a lot of flexibility and also just like an open-mindedness that if you ask for something or ask for a channel or a program or a modification, it's a open dialogue for a program that is evolving kind of to meet the needs of the writers. Because I feel like a lot of what we've been learning about is how both the writing world and the publishing world are evolving. So the program itself is kind of evolving with that as well. So I also like that you could be not only a participant, but also make suggestions, and those suggestions were heard.
That's great. I mean, I love that too, because I do think that's my background before I started this was, I started a company and I'm very interested in entrepreneurial and like kind of this commitment to constant improvement, which is kind of a startup ethos where you're like, okay. And then, so people come into the group and they're like, wow, they have this talent, this interest, and let's bring them in. Let's bring in their expertise and let's bring in their point of view. I mean, Jamie's a really great example of that because she's such a skilled teacher and so good at, many things. And she's also working on a ghost story, and I was very excited about that. So we're like, and then Jamie naturally kind of gravitated towards a leadership role, which many of the other people are doing in different ways. I'm going to just kind of give you the broad outlines of the 4 stages of the program. I mean, I'll kind of ping pong back with Allison and Jamie and do some more shout outs to some of the participants to give them their point of view. So basically there's 4 important steps. So the first one we alluded to is this kind of pre-work. We call it the story development or conception. So that's step 1. Step 2 is the drafting, which is like, okay, I've done my story development and my pre-work. Now I'm going to just, from March to September, I'm just generating words. I'm writing a story. I'm trying not to be edit as I'm going along. I'm not trying to be critical. So a lot of that focus is on word count and writing practice. Okay, what are the things getting in your way? How can we help you? And then once we do that, we go into the third phase, which we talked a little bit about, is the reading round, which is we share the manuscripts and we get feedback and we do this training and support on that. And then the last section is, okay, now you've done your draft, you've reached the big deadline, you've gotten your feedback. So what do you do with that information? And that's the revision plan. We also do some revision in that last section at the end of the year. So the first section is something that I never really knew about in the MFA world. I mean, it was kind of a mystery where you're like, okay, you're going to journal and you're going to do things. And, a lot of the literary, kind of tradition that I came from was like, you follow your muse and you just kind of write. E.L. Doctorow famously said, you're just kind of, driving in the dark and you can just see, 20 feet ahead with your headlights and which I think, it's a romantic ideal. I think doing it, follow the muse, they call it, what is it? The pantser versus the plotter. So the pantser, Evelyn just wrote a nice journal article that we reissued about that. It's kind of like this idea that you just go by your seat of your pants, you follow the muse and take it where you go. And the plotter is maybe more associated with genre people, like maybe thrillers or mysteries or romances, where you say, okay, we're going to actually write out an outline and make it very detailed. So, but when you get down to it and, after interviewing novelists and hanging out with them and picking their brain and really seeing, people run the gamut of all these different approaches. And I do think that there is something that's kind of bubbled up over the year, this kind of best practices. And one of the things we're really committed to is like, okay, well, what is the best approach that will work for the most people? And Allison, alluded to this, like we might say, hey, here's some ideas. And you might say, okay, I'm going to try that, but it ultimately doesn't work for me, or it's not the right time for it. And that's all fine. But if you have this open-mindedness to do that. So what are the things in story development and conception we use? So we have this one book it's the 90-Day Novel, and it's a really great journaling guide. So basically you just pick it up for that day and it just asks you questions. Who's your protagonist? Who's your antagonist? What are their wants or needs? What's going on? And it's just these really great prompts that just encourage you to journal. So in that early stage, Allison said it kind of starts a little slower, time commitment, but if you can journal on your book, 20 minutes a day. I mean, really give that, your unconscious is going to start going to town. This book is going to start writing itself. You're like, okay, I've got my protagonist, I'm doing this. So that kind of just really kind of fundamental, like I'm just starting to throw some ideas out there, get some conflicts going, get some ideas going. And then all that's the journaling. So on top of that, we also, use another book called Save the Cat, which maybe you've been familiar with. It's a book that's like a really accessible, easy to read version of the beats that screenwriters have used. And I never knew anything about the beats when I, whole MFA, I graduated, got a diploma, the whole thing, and I never heard of this before. So it kind of blew my mind, like, oh my gosh, there is kind of these, specific transition points in any story that, it's kind of the Aristotelian, pyramid. So the escalating conflict, the climax, the denouement. So this is more kind of broken down to some models are, or have slight variations, but generally speaking, it's about 15 touch points in your book that you focus on. Things like the setup, which is the beginning, the catalyst, or the thing that kind of sets the story in motion. The rising action, there's lots of different names. Some of it gets a little jargony at times, but we spend a lot of time kind of digging into these different beats and saying, okay, what are you going to have happens in the midpoint? How are you going to, break into this act two, things like that. And it's fun, it's interesting. A lot of us know a lot of these things intrinsically because we're all watching a lot of movies and streaming shows, so we kind of tapped into common touch points that we could use for that. And then we build our beat sheet outlines, things like that. And these things they're not like recipes that you have to follow and say, oh, I have this. It's more just kind of like supporting you with raw material. So when you do get into the drafting mode, you do have touch points to say, okay, I'm going to write to this next beat. I'm going to, I have this raw material about characters. I've done some investigation into setting. I've done some sketches. And what I find, when I do all this pre-work, Allison alluded to this as well, is that you're kind of, you're starting to do this and you're like, okay, I'm writing about a character. All of a sudden I'm starting to write scenes. And this is very common. It's like your brain is starting to think that way. And it's like, and then that's when the magic happens. You're basically just kind of giving the raw material for your unconscious and your artistic side of your brain to get going. And if you're committed to it and you're, you're putting in that work, it's like, you got 20 minutes of your ego, saying, okay, Greg, you've got to sit down for 30 minutes today and do it. And then the rest of your time, your unconscious is like, hey, you're driving to the store to pick up something, and you're like, oh, I just had an idea, got to write that down. Oh, I just had this. So Evelyn, is this? Am I telling the truth here? Was this your experience in this early story development phase?
You too. Yeah, a little bit.
Sorry to give me some details. I to do a quick transition to you, but I do think
I had always been wanting to write a novel. It started one, dropped it, and I think what's so good about the process is that you're kind of finding your way as a writer. You're finding your own rhythm. You're finding your own methods, and that's a lot of fun. And the Slack channel for me, and the accountability and the community just kind of rooting me on, kept me going. And it's been really one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. This incubator really has.
I don't know if anybody's been as enthusiastic as Evelyn. So it was like, as soon as I met her, I was like, I love her. She's such a good supporter of the group and brings such high energy. And we're going to meet in person soon, Evelyn. I'm hoping. So
I hope so too.
We only live less, probably 50 miles away. She's in Brooklyn. I'm down on the Jersey Shore. So, but I do think it's like kind of like, yeah, we're artists. We're not, and I think that's kind of like the biggest thing I think that gets me so excited about being part of this is that there's this book, kind of like this bucket list thing. Maybe you wanted to do it for a long time. Maybe you're just kind of had this idea. I always think of Haruki Murakami. Like he was watching a baseball game one day. He was a jazz club owner, almost like, oh, maybe I should write a novel. Like it just came to him one day, and then all of a sudden he becomes this master. But I think that's like, okay, you want to do something that's kind of pretty countercultural, kind of rebellious, kind of wacky in this world of ours, to do something, to make art but how do you do that? And I think that's kind of what we're here about. So
can I add something, Greg? Because something
sure.
that we've talked about, I didn't think 50,000 words just seemed impossible to me. Like I was just really skeptical. I was like, how do you even do that? And kind of trusting the process and really thinking, okay, 500 words a day, Monday through Friday, 500 words a day. I think Greg, I know Greg said that, in our meetings, Zoom meetings, and it really does work. 500 words a day. You put your words in for the day. You enjoy your day. And that adds up. And that really adds up. And you will have a novel. You will have a novel. Your novel.
And it feels good. Like if you do that kind of early.
It does.
It's like, wow.
It feels really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how it worked was that since the program, will go into the summer, what I would do is I'd get my 500 words in. If I had more words in me, I'd write, and I'd enjoy my day. I'd go out, I'd go ride my bike, I'd go on the beach. So don't be so hard on yourself. Enjoy this process, stay open. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable, and have fun. Have fun.
Thanks, Evelyn. You're awesome. I think I just want to sign off there, really. But
It's my turn to talk, Greg.
Right. We gotta keep going here. So I'm gonna hand it over to Allison for the let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say about this section. Yeah, so I'd stressed this before, but is this any good when you're writing? Like like this is what we're just letting this story kind of flow out. We're letting the unconscious, I mean, the good stories, that's where they come from. They're not coming from, this, like an algorithm in the brain. It's like we gotta let the artistic channel open it up, pay homage to it, let it flow. Allison, what happens during the next phase?
The next phase, so you just talked about like the pre-writing, right? Like all the story development. Okay. And then you begin to draft. And what's cool about this, like I said, you get like a little agitated. Like you just want to write sentences instead of taking all these notes. You're like, can I just like start my word count? And I think it's nice to have all that pressure building and building and building so that when you do start to draft, you can ride that wave for quite a while. And some of the things, I mean, we've already heard people's experiences about writing 500 words a day and how it adds up so fast. Like suddenly you're scrolling through your document and you're like, oh my gosh, look at all these marks on the page. Like, when did that happen? But one of the things that is like a tenet of our program is that we don't discuss our stories, our novels, our work. We could talk about the process, but we don't give the details of what we're writing about because we are trying to preserve, everyone in the program is a fresh reader. So in September, when all of our drafts are complete and we begin to swap manuscripts, that person won't know for the most part. I mean, some people let a little bit slip every now and then. Like you'll find out that someone's protagonist is, a woman or something. And you're like, and then you have that in your head. But for the most part, we don't talk about it. We just keep all that to ourselves. It's our secret. I actually work really well in this capacity. So we started in 2020 before the pandemic hit, and no one in my family knew I was writing a manuscript. I didn't tell anyone I lived with, any extended family, no one. Whenever I was buckling down at the computer, they thought I was working. And that helped move me forward. I didn't want to let any gas out of my tank. I wanted all that gas to go to the motor of writing. And it really helped me. Other people get motivated by telling their commitments to people so that they're held accountable. But for whatever reason, that doesn't work for me. As soon as I tell someone I want to quit. So knowing that about myself, I kept it a secret. And again, this just like, it's similar to the pressure building when you're doing all your note-taking and pre-writing, is this secret that you have. You're eager to get the whole story down because you can't wait to tell people what your story is about. But what is the best way to tell your story is to let people read it. Greg's great anecdote that he talks about all the time is like, do you want to be at a cocktail party talking to someone who has like 10 ideas for a book or someone who's actually written a book? Like, which one do you want to talk to? You do not want to talk to the person who has all these ideas and has not written a word. Blah, 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 blah. You want to talk to the person who actually went through the process and completed a manuscript. That person's interesting. What else is here? Oh, resistance. We're going to read a book that's all about resistance. It's very, life-changing to start to think about resistance as something to live with, similar to your ego. That resistance will always be there. The more that you try, the larger and stronger resistance becomes, and just befriending it and knowing it'll be there. There will be times where you will convince yourself you need to quit the program. You cannot write a book. This is not for you. Your story's too complicated. It can't be written. And that's why the group is there to say, oh, remember, that's resistance talking. Resistance is not going to win this battle. We won't let it. Let's see. Keeping the work to ourselves. Yeah. Then after so we keep trucking with our drafts quietly, talking about the writing process. And it's kind of like cute too, to like talk around your plot. Like you can't give it all away. I don't know if Greg let it leak that he was working on a ghost story. Little pieces come out here and there. But once your draft is done is when we start to do the revision round. And we have a guide for you. You do not have to like We used to write a letter. You don't have to write a letter. Everything has, I believe it's like a form with fields that you fill out. I'm trying to think of like an analogy. You have this piece of art that you've created, right? Like think of it like a piece of pottery, you know, like a beautiful vase. And like you see it this way, you've seen it since the beginning. You've shaped it and you tried to make it look a certain way that you had in your mind's eye. And then you hand it over to someone else and you're like, describe that thing to me as though I'm an alien. What is that thing? And they tell you, oh, it's ceramic, it's blue, and they describe it to you, and then you get to understand, like, was I successful? Did that person see what I was seeing, what I tried to put out there? And the answer is always going to be no. You will never write the book that's in your head, and that's okay. Like, it just can't be done. We have like the next great American novel in our minds. And what we actually produce, we're probably going to be disgusted by because our taste is so damn good. But we have our fellows to tell us, this is what I see. This is the potential. This is where it's going. This is working really well. Keep going in this direction. And that'll propel you forward again. Did somebody want to say something?
Say something.
Evelyn?
I think what's so special about the program is that there's no, and there's was mentioned earlier, there's really no judgment or criticism or tearing down of your work. It's really supporting it and wanting it to be the best work that you can do. Like, you know, it's really encouraging you that much. And I was very nervous for my reading rounds. But it went very, very well. And like I said, it's there's no tearing down. There's just really only encouraging you to write the story that you want to write.
Thank you for that. We also all have our strengths, and thank goodness we're in a group too, because there's some people who just naturally write amazing dialogue, and there's others who like it just like they can't get it right on the first, second, third try. Well, when you have that amazing dialogue writer as your reader, they're going to help you with that. You know, they can help point out, like, this is how we can make it stronger if you ask them. I feel like that is one of the best selling points of the program is that we can all lean into each other's strengths. We all have something to offer. I think that's it for that section. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat as we go, because we can also field them and weave it into, you know, what we had prepared. You don't have to hold them till the end of the presentation.
I'm gonna go. I have to hop off, but nice.
Thanks, Jessica, for coming.
Take care. Thanks for having me.
So the reading rounds, maybe Alison, you could just make a couple comments on about that. We talked that in a couple of different references so far, but maybe just can talk a little bit about the logistics of that a little.
I think it's different now from when we did it the first year. And as somebody mentioned before, we keep honing our best practices. So the first year we had several swaps, several reading rounds. I want to say 4. Do you remember?
Well, no, that was over a couple of years. I mean, basically the reading round is we divide into pods of 3 people, and so that's over a period of 6 to 8 weeks, depending on if maybe there could be 4 in your group. But then, so the first group, you would read the first book, and then 2 weeks later you would read the second, and 2 weeks later you would read that. So, and then as Alison mentioned, you'd have what was that?
Hard copy?
Yeah, usually we do hard copies, and we've had groups that say they want to do it electronic, but we really strongly advise doing hard copies just because we want to simulate the reading experience as much as possible, where you're sitting down, you're reading a book, and you have your pen and you are doing annotations as you do it. But we give you a nice training on doing that. And actually, a lot of the people who participate, I feel this very strongly myself, is when I read the other people's work, it's actually a great learning experience. It helps me a lot with my own writing, just as far as thinking about the book, thinking about how they're doing. And as Alison mentioned, so we have this kind of guideline to say, okay, well, talk to about the setting. What was your impression about the setting? What was your impression about the theme? Who do you think the main characters were? What was their arc? What was their principal conflicts? So these kind of directed questions are things that we use in kind of our pre-writing to kind of conceptualize what we're doing, and then we also use it as our analytic brain after we've done a draft to say, okay, this is kind of what I wrote. Now let's look at it analytically and say, okay, did that land? Did the minor characters serve a role? And those are the times you're saying, wow, that character is really fleshed out, and the readers really responded to it, and they didn't really mention this other character. So I have to think about that. Was that because I didn't get, we direct our efforts in different ways, and some characters we work on earlier, and then later drafts will kind of fix or expand the other ones. But we might say, hey, that character wasn't as important as I thought. They didn't seem to be really that important, or maybe we combine characters, or so this kind of like you read the book, you annotate it, you fill out this kind of directed feedback thing, and then you actually one of the most exciting, super fun things is to actually discuss it. So after those 2 weeks, you're in a group together, and it's kind of like if listening to a podcast about your own book, like with some cool people who are very interested in it and want to talk about it. So the writer is not to talk. This is something Allison strongly advocated early on, and that I thought was, I kind of listened to her, and that was a super good idea, because the writer can relax and just take notes. So the two other readers are kind of Siskel and Ebert, but like with a positive spin, like to say, hey, what do you think about that? Oh, I thought that was interesting. Did you notice this? Wow, yeah, I did. That's really interesting. That reminded me of this. It's really this kind of wonderful. I mean, I feel like biased saying these things. Maybe you guys can corroborate, but it's almost like a peak experience. Like you're listening to, two people that you've gotten to know really well, that you really like, and they're talking about your book, and you're like, how are they talking about this thing that's only been in my brain and I've kept secret, and they're actually talking about it as if it's real. It's really this kind of really energizes you. And I think that's the big purpose of the reading round. Positive feedback, things that can shape your revision, but the most important thing is to keep that motor running, right? So you've got that draft. I want to see this going. I want to see this. I want you to keep going. And I think that's a really important thing. Jamie.
We had a good question in the chat, and coming in from Michelle. Could you share a little bit more about the writing sample required for the application? Any do's or don'ts, what you'd like to see more of?
Yeah, the writing, one of the things I think hopefully makes it clear in somewhere in those guidelines, but we're not evaluating, like, is this like, we're not kind of judging the prose. We're just kind of wanting to see what your style, if you can share what you're doing, but I don't want people to kind of sweat it. I mean, I think we're really just looking for people who, I guess it's just, they take pride in their writing at some level, and I think that's important. Dana, thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful to meet you. I want to talk to you more soon. So I think it's really, we just wanted to kind of get a little bit of just to kind of get to know you a little bit. Usually what we do is we have the application, we talk to a couple references, and it's, I'm always hesitant to even do this because I don't, it's like this committee is judging you. We're just basically looking for people who are good fits, who get what we're about and want to be part of it, and they are committed. That's really kind of what the criteria is. And so, hopefully, was that good, Michelle? She gave a thumbs up, so.
You answered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think that's pretty much it. So, I mean, then the revision plan, I kind of mentioned that's something that we gather all that feedback. You have all these great artifacts. You have your annotations. You have your kind of your letter, which is a kind of a template of kind of written out answers, and then you have your discussion, which you take notes, and then you're like, okay, got to gather that all up together, and then what do you do? I mean, we have lots of different techniques to do that. There's this one writer and educator, Matt Bell, that we really like a lot, who's inspired a lot of our practices in that regard. He's really a wonderful person in that he's kind of committed to best practices and taking the best of everybody. He's got a great newsletter that we like to read and share and talk about. So you get all that information. It's only good if you can use it, right? So we really spend a lot of time on doing a revision plan and saying, okay, these are the major things that I want to tackle in the next revision. And then you could talk to your pod about that. And that's where the accountability comes in. Okay, this is what I heard from you. This is what my plan is. And then they could say, hey, that's great. You're good. Or, hey, I think maybe that you stressed that a little bit too much. We didn't mean it quite like that. We'd like to clarify something. And that's another way to keep thinking. And I think over the years, doing these multiple incubators and with different people, what's wonderful is that once you establish a relationship with your fellow writers, you can actually tap into them later to say, hey, would you mind reading an opening chapter again, or a new outline, or what we're working on? And then, it's a super pleasure for your fellow reader to say, hey, yeah, I'd love to read, it's super simple. I could just read a chapter and give you feedback. And again, it's just keeping that energy going, keeping that mojo going. And that's really the most important thing. So that's kind of it. I think that's kind of Jamie.
Oh, yeah, I think you summarized it really well. And I was just going to add to that. I mean, give yourself credit for coming here and taking that first step on a cold Wednesday night at the end of November. The fact that you came and wanted to listen and know more, there is some idea or desire where you really want to get something across on the page. And for me, similar to Evelyn, like I looked for the fun in it. And also this is a very soothing thing for all the younger versions of myself that always said, oh, I want to write. I want to be a writer. I want to write. And just allowing myself to do something that was challenging, but also something that was just very creatively nourishing, just gave me more energy in my everyday life somehow, even though we're all super busy, that I was actually doing something where I was creating something that I'd always dreamed of doing.
Thanks, Jim. That was awesome. So Evelyn and Rachel, do you guys have some comments before I want to see if we can get some more questions going, if anybody has anything?
I don't know. I can't think of anything. Just give it a shot. Even if you're not sure, just put the application in. Give it a shot. Give your story a shot. Give yourself a shot.
And I did put that link to the application in the chat. If you want to just click it, if you're interested, then you can just think on it if you want, because finding the links are always my thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And and there's if there's questions now, that'd be great. And if you have questions afterwards, you could I'm going to put my direct email in here, but if you also want to just ask a general question to bookinc@projectrightnow.org, you could do that as well. Does anybody have any questions now?
No hands?
And we've been fielding them as we've been going. So I've gotten some DMs. We asked some questions. Emily put her hand up.
Can I, sorry. A lot of what everyone talked about was really great, super inspiring. I think this idea of having a dream to be a writer and kind of deferring it for many of us, like, at least in my experience, like, for writers, especially people in the creative arts, it's like, well, that's not a real job, right? So you're going to do all these other things first before you get to do the thing you actually wanted to do from day one. But I wanted to circle back so really wonderful. Thank you all for sharing your experience with it. It was with the program, very inspiring and very empowering. I wanted to just circle back to the writing sample. So, because Allison knows I've been panicking about this. I am it's funny because everyone says, oh, you're a writer. I'm like, no, I just write for other people, all of these things. So if you need an obituary, you call me and I write it for you. So in the writing sample, I know you want it in the genre we're interested in, but part of and perhaps this might be an issue for me, right? I just a little bit about me. I have 4 kids under the age of 14. Like, it's a lot, right? They're really loud in the background too. But I don't, it's the holidays. So I don't have something in the genre that I'm interested in pursuing. I have a ton of notes because I'm excited to pursue this path, but I want to approach this kind of like how I would an MFA. I have a higher degree in literature, and there's something to me that I love about workshopping and going through and sort of starting something together. So parameters for the sample, in a nutshell, does it need to be in the genre we hope to pursue, or do you just want to see that we can write prose of some kind that's not technical?
Yeah, I think prose of some kind that's not technical. Okay. I think if you're a professional writer, you'd already be
right.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's pretty much, Evelyn, were you going to say something? Or you?
I just want to add something about the application process, just the application itself. What I loved about it was it's really getting to know you, who you are, right? And I think that's what's so unique about the program, because they want to know who you are. It's not just about your writing, because you're going to be part of a community, and we want people to encourage and support each other. So don't stress too much about the sample. Let the program know just who you are. Let them know who you are.
Thank you.
Also, if you've ever had to select writers for anything, it's just weeding out the people who are not going to take it seriously. Like, in order to ask you to actually submit things, it's like, oh, you're actually committed. You actually care. If all you had to do was click a button and sign up for this incubator, and then we had to hang out with you for 12 months, that would be scary.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't even think when we first started this, we didn't even have a writing sample for the novel incubator, because I was so opposed to like if you apply to anything now, it's very much, you got to do a big thing, like a one-time Tin House workshop, you have to submit a chapter or something, right? And it's like a big deal, and they make a big deal about how you were selected by this committee, and they're vetting all these different things. And I think that's that, I don't think that's like something separate from what we're trying to do here. That this is like, we want to support you to get your book done and take yourself seriously as an artist. So it's a different, like, instead of like we're judging your writing, like we're like these vaulted eminences who can say, oh yeah, this is, I just find that so, like, I'm so against it. I probably couldn't, I've been writing for such a long time, and I don't want to apply to those things and get judged by people. Like, it's just, I've done it for MFAs and but to me, it's like, I want to write to get it out there to someone who's going to read it and not judge it. Like, it's different. Like, I wanted someone to have a satisfying reading experience. So anyway, I'm getting off track here, but we decided to do the writing sample because there was, some people who it didn't even seem like they were interested in writing as a craft. So it was just kind of like and we discovered that eventually, but we're just trying to kind of see if people are professional, do they take their writing, like the quality of writing, seriously? It's, it's kind of like Wordle. Do you like to do it in 4 steps, or you don't care? I mean, it seems almost funny to even say this, but do you take pride in writing a sentence or a paragraph? And, everybody's at different levels, and that doesn't mean, I'm learning and I don't feel like it's a lifelong process, but I think I like it. I like doing it. I want to keep doing it. I want to get better at it. And, it's like, so hopefully that helps. I feel like I'm making it more obscure, but just the fact that you're a professional writer, I'd be like, you don't have, it's like, it's like,
the obituary.
Yeah, I would say I'd actually enjoy that. I mean, not to be morbid, but what do you think, Jamie? Ghost stories, reading obituaries?
Obviously.
Not an obituary. I'm using the wrong word. What's the thing you deliver? Eulogy. but I have to put it in other people's voices. So like, you know, but to your point, Greg, I really appreciate that, because I did take a few writing courses in college, and I went to a program that was really strong for creative nonfiction. And the one professor I had, you know, you could tell just thrived off of criticizing, and was a very specific type of human being. And all of the other human beings that weren't in his worldview, you know, or related to him in the leather jacket way, was just like, oh, well, you have an A in the course, but I have no feedback for you, and I don't like what you're writing. I'm like, okay, well, that's not helpful. So I appreciate too some of that, because when I met Allison, I had started to get the spark to start writing, and so I felt like the universe was calling. She's like, well, we're doing this incubator. You could do that instead of this local MFA program. And I was just like, well, that makes more sense. So anyway, thank you for sharing all of that information and helpfulness. So appreciate
it. Emily, that's awesome. I really like what you just said, because I think that's why, I mean, I had experiences with that professors. It's just like this, I don't know what that is, but it's not this, you know, and it actually has nothing to do with art. It has to do with exploiting power and kind of like, you know, this identity thing. And it's, you know, the patriarchy thing, which I think is a big part of that too. And you're just like, that sucks. And I'm, as a white male, I experienced it and I thought it sucked, you know, and I know it's worse for women and for minorities, because, you know, but it's just anyway, I just think it's just wrong. And I think most programs are slowly getting the memo, but I think you don't need to spend $30,000 to do this either. So I don't think, do it together, get best practices. It's just it's a more of effective way to do it. And I do think it's more fun. And I think, you know, I mean, that's why, you know, like Evelyn and Rachel and, you know, and Jamie, like these people I'd never met, all of a sudden they're like good friends of mine. I have so much respect for. And I feel like, you know, lifelong, hopefully we'll be doing this for a while. But it just, you know, art is hard. You don't need all that.
Art is hard. That's our new tagline. It's I want to add something. Maybe I glitched. That's what the kids are saying, right? I did not catch whether we made it clear that the peer leaders are writing alongside the rest of the group. That is a huge distinction that I don't think you find anywhere else. Typically, there is an esteemed artist or writer or somebody published who is like talking, like it's like top down, like this is how you do it. I wrote this book in this amount of time. This is how you do it, without actually showing you or like walking alongside you while you do it. So what happens is, if, you know, so it would be Jamie and me starting with a blank page, just like you, and slogging along, you know, 500 words a day, 5 days a week, with our full-time jobs and our lives and our obstacles that we will hurdle rather than run away from, right alongside you. So I think that's a huge difference. The other thing, that there's going to be some other things that I want to make clear when we begin the program, but like we've seen a lot of pitfalls, and one is trying to start too many projects at once. Like, we really want you to focus on the one project. If you have something on the side going on, keep it a secret. Only talk about the project that we're working on. You know, we've had people who just take on like 3 giant projects and, you know, give their love to the other 2. And we're like, but what about us? Like, we're focusing on this one. Any other questions or anything else to add?
We're all good in the chat.
All right, cool. Sometimes we're like beating people away. We do have slots open. I believe the memoir is full.
It's not quite. We have a couple slots for that as well.
Okay, well, nearly full.
Yeah, and so I mean, that's the thing. The applications are rolling. We're kind of, and we're starting in January. So if you're ready to apply and you think this is good, you know, the sooner the better, clearly. But if you're like, okay, you know, just keep us, you know, and if you keep us abreast of what your thoughts are, if you are seriously interested. And if there's anything, I'm glad, Emily, you talked about the writing sample. It's interesting because I I think I would be stressing about the writing sample myself, and I'm kind of like wondering, like, well, maybe we need more better language for that. Just to kind of, I don't know. I hate stressing people out. It's kind of like my, you know. Anyway.
No, in fairness, I would be stressed about, I always tell my therapist, right? I'm stressed if the grass isn't green enough, like I'm somehow accountable for that. So I think the writing sample is a perfectly fine request for submission, but it's that, again, what I love about this program, and I appreciate the comments, like it's that hurdle of, this is something I want to do. I want to get started, and the commitment part is huge. And both you and Allison and Jamie talked about that. And, again, appreciate it. So it's fine. I'm happy that I hopped on the Zoom, and I'm happy that a lot of the people who were in the program were here to talk about it. So gave me a lot of good feedback.
That's great. Thanks. Anybody else? All right, we're 12 minutes early. How is that for efficiency? We're on a tight ship here. So again, thanks for coming, and definitely keep us, if you reach out, if you have any questions. The website's got a lot of stuff. We didn't mention the journal. That's another benefit of the program, is that we really encourage our writers to submit short essays about their process. And it's just a nice way to kind of do something that kind of, you're working on this long-term project, but it's nice to come up with an idea, conceptualize it, going through a couple editorial rounds and get it published. And that'll also build your writer's profile. So if you click on, any one of us on the writing pages, and we've got to update Allison's. So, but you can see, there's a picture of the person, and then all their latest journals. And then if you have publications, we put that up there as well. And, links to your social media and stuff like that. So again, it's like just kind of keeping that flowing, keeping a kind of this environment where you can keep writing and get stuff out there while you're working on a bigger project. All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. I really appreciate it. It was great to see you, and hopefully we'll see you in the program.
Good
Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
So what do you think?
We nailed it.
We did.
Ooh, I'm gonna turn off the recording.
You did great.